Hello and welcome to the Sunday recap. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11 on Twitter, and we're gonna save the good stuff for the end here. Obviously, with the game that everyone's talking about, and you in particular. I gotta hear. Well, I kind of heard your take, but everyone else wants to hear your take on Chuck Pagano's. I don't know, ingenuity, whatever you want to call it, from last night. So there's your little preview of the end, but we'll start off at the beginning and talk about the Jets, aka Chris Ivory and Brandon Marshall, as they face the Redskins. And obviously, you mentioned here, Jets defense were a fairly popular target. No one really expected much from the Redskins. They still didn't do much. Garcon scored a touchdown. That's about it. And Chris Ivory, though, he's now leading the AFC in rushing after having a bye week and missing a game. So, I mean, he's gone from value play to elite play now at his price tag.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's not a lot of full workhorse backs in the league anymore. And looking at Ivory, he's one of the few remaining. I mean, 20 carries. I think the 50 yards in the air with 3 receptions, that was definitely surprising. And that really made him, I mean, that's 8 DK points right there for you, and something that he usually doesn't do. So that was a nice surprise.
Yeah, and Brandon Marshall, slow start, and then made that ridiculous catch that you see Ryan Fitzpatrick, just in absolute disbelief. And it seems like everything that Brandon Marshall has done this year has been someone's in disbelief. When it was that pitch to maybe Manti Te'o's girlfriend or whoever he was throwing it to, and then this play. I mean, he's just gets 100 yards every week. It just doesn't matter how he does it. He just always does it. So those two guys, I'm generally terrified of looking at Jets and saying I'm going to play 2 Jets in a cash game. But, I mean, from this point forward, it's not a bad strategy to go ahead and lock those 2 guys in because they're the only real options in that offense.
Yeah.
And as far as Redskins go, no thanks. This next one was pretty ugly on the offensive side for the Steelers. Not so much better on the Cardinals side. And we saw Michael Vick was awful. I was watching some, I think it was CBS after the games yesterday, and seeing all the guys saying that Michael Vick couldn't complete a pass. I think he only had 3 incompletions, but he just didn't have time to throw. He just is incapable of using Antonio Brown. And then they finally bring in an actual quarterback in Landry Jones, and all he does is, well, the second touchdown pass was more of like a glorified screen pass that was run 80-some yards for a touchdown. But he got it done, at least, and I don't see any way that the Steelers go back to Michael Vick, and I don't know why they were this stubborn late into this game anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking no Martavis Bryant, and the Steelers don't win this game because, I mean, he made those plays happen. And I think the one thing, Bell didn't have a reception this game. I mean, that's huge on the play calling, as well as whoever's under center to not have that happen. Even though he still touched the ball 24 times, he didn't do much. I wasn't too high on him this week because of Arizona's defense anyway.
Yes. Yeah, it was a ridiculous situation, if you ask me. He had seven receptions each of the 2 games after his return, then went down to 4 last week, and you mentioned 0 this week. I mean, that's baffling to me for a team that's struggling on offense, and I mean, can't get the ball to the other playmaker. So I don't get it. And on the Cardinals side, if you played Carson Palmer, he threw for a ton of yards, only 1 touchdown, and really just didn't have a great game. But the one guy that did have a great game quietly, nobody really seemed to talk about him all week other than he's going to catch a long touchdown. We've been waiting for it all year. John Brown had 196 yards. So if you were one of the people that had him, I actually saw him in a couple cash game lineups, which was surprising to me. But he exploded in this one.
Yeah. I also like that Michael Floyd had a touchdown, everyone's favorite wide receiver. That was kind of funny.
Yeah, right. So now, well, not now, but that's probably his only touchdown he'll score all year. Or maybe he'll go on one of those little runs a couple weeks in a row. Everyone will play him, and he'll just stand there on the field, not doing anything the following week for 0 catches. But yeah, no thanks. You guys can be on that train without me. No thanks. Chiefs and the Vikings. Jamal Charles, first week without him, and it looked like a week without Jamal Charles. This one was ugly, and both defenses actually played really well, especially the Vikings defense. But the Chiefs did a great job of shutting down Adrian Peterson in this one. He had 26 carries, but only 60 total yards. So in this one, really the story in this one was Stephon Diggs having a huge game, and then the Vikings defense looking good, but the Chiefs, Charkandrick West, Nile Davis situation. Everyone said Charkandrick West would be the feature, and I guess he technically was more featured than Nile Davis, but this just looks like a situation where this is a bad team, and you want no part of it.
Yeah, and I really expected Jeremy Maclin to get a lot more touches and targets because, especially in the screen game, if say West wasn't working, they could kind of substitute that, and that just didn't happen. But I think the Vikings secondary is actually fairly decent, so I'm not really too surprised.
Yeah, and I mean the whole running defense thing with the Vikings, I feel like their numbers are still pretty skewed from that huge game they gave up week one to
Yeah.
Carlos Hyde and company. So, I think this is a good defensive team, and I mean they were a solid value, and they didn't do anything great on the defensive end, but they were a good enough like cash game team this week. Bengals and Bills here. Next one, Andy Dalton for MVP. Anyone? Is it just me? Is it just because I'm a Bengals fan, or is he? If it weren't for Tom Brady, would he not be the AFC frontrunner? Or am I crazy?
I'll give it to you. I'll say,
Thank
but
you.
I hate the Patriots, so you know what?
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm biased too.
Yeah, but I mean, he was great, and once again, did it without really needing AJ Green. We had Marvin Jones had a solid game, seemingly someone stepping up every other game, and then EJ Manuel in this one. I saw him get a lot of criticism afterward, but I mean, I thought he played pretty well in this game considering, and another one of those guys you saw littered into some cash game lineups because he was minimum salary. I mean, he counted for a couple touchdowns, but I think the real key for the Bills, though, was LaShawn McCoy being back, and he looked good. I mean, that first play of the game ran for, what was it, a 40-yard run? And I mean, he didn't put up huge numbers because they didn't throw him the ball out of the backfield, which I was really surprised by. Maybe it's because of the workload, I don't know, but I thought he looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, 90 yards on the score, that's a lot more than I expected from him this week, especially being down, most of the game. But without Percy Harvin, possibly without Sammy Watkins for an extended amount of time, him and Charles Clay are going to be the guys going forward. Hopefully
Yeah.
Taylor can come back soon.
Yeah, hopefully. And Sammy Watkins, at least he caught that touchdown. If you took a chance on him before he, I'm not sure what the diagnosis is on his ankle, but left the game doesn't look good. So I guess we'll have to look into that here soon. Next up, the Bears and Lions, and this one was a shootout. And as you mentioned here, no shocker, both defenses pretty terrible. And Matt Stafford was a guy that a lot of people took a chance on this week. I was not one of them because I just don't think Matt Stafford is very good. And he threw 3 touchdown passes and an interception that was counted as a touchdown. So 4 total touchdowns, and Golden Tate happy. But that was definitely the biggest controversy of the week until Chuck Pagano decided that he wanted to be in the headlines. So what's your take on that touchdown? Because I think it's absolutely ridiculous that was a touchdown.
Yeah, but I think it's also part of the refs trying to repay the Lions. God, they just had such bad luck. Let's just give it to them one time.
Yeah, they figure if you're ever just going to give it to them against the Bears, because it's not like the Bears are going anywhere either. Maybe that's what it was. But
The bottom of the NFC North there, nobody's really paying attention.
yeah, I mean they have their own definitions for touchdowns in the NFC North apparently. But Calvin Johnson, we saw him, have a decent game, but once again it kind of just seemed like blown coverage or single coverage against the guy who's half his size, and Matt Stafford did what he has always done. And that's just throw the ball up to him. And I mean, why wouldn't you? You get single coverage on Calvin Johnson. I'll throw the ball up in the air to him against anyone.
Yeah, and I've been waiting for that all year because, and he was stuck at 3 for 90 for the longest time, and I was kind of losing my mind. I was like, okay, come on.
Waiting for that bonus.
Yes, are they going to drive down the field and throw in the Johnson? And a couple penalties later, he found the end zone, so I was happy.
Yeah, and that late catch. And really the other big story in this one, I think is, well, there's 2 guys really. Lance Moore had a nice game, but you certainly don't expect Matt Stafford to throw 400 yards, maybe ever again in his life, the way he's looked every week except for this one. But the real thing was Alshon Jeffrey. We didn't know if he was going to come back or not. Came back and had a huge game too. So Alshon Jeffrey, a guy who's really, really cheap, well, relative to other upper tier wide receivers. So that's a guy that I'll be taking advantage of here the next couple weeks.
Yeah, he looked really good.
Yeah, and speaking of looking really good, Peyton Manning did not look really good. Broncos and the Browns did Browns things and tried really hard to put themselves in a position to beat a good team, and then realized that they were about to beat a good team and made sure that they lost the game because that's what they do. But really just not much to say about this one other than the Broncos defense is still elite. I mean, they stopped everyone that wasn't named Gary Barnidge, and I know people talking about how McCown had a good game. He had an okay game for his volume, but Gary Barnidge had those 2 touchdown catches. Travis Benjamin had a couple long ones, but really, I mean, I'll play this Broncos defense against anybody, and I mean, they're matchup proof at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you give take away the interceptions, they're not putting the Broncos defense in a bad spot, which really happened in this game. So, I mean, they would have came out with way more points and looked a lot better if it wasn't for 3 picks from Manning.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peyton Manning Express, I think, is one that's it's left my station. I threw him in one GPP this week, as I do most weeks, just kind of hoping that he comes back with the glory days, or at least last year's semi-glory days, and that just seems like it's not the case. I saw a stat now. He's got 7 touchdown passes through 6 games this year and had 7 touchdown passes in one game last year. So Peyton Manning, put him at minimum salary and I'll make him be a GPP player, but that's obviously not going to happen. Yeah, maybe. Even then, I don't want the negatives. Maybe on a site with no negatives for interceptions, if those exist. But yeah, it's not pretty. But once again, Emmanuel Sanders still did his thing, like you said here. Got over 100 yards. Demaryius Thomas had an okay game, but as someone who's still slightly overpriced considering how bad his quarterback has been, I think Sanders is still just the guy that you're going to play if you're going to play anyone from here. Next one, the Texans and the Jags. Saw Twitter freaking out about the wind before the game. We were talking about it before the show here, and people were off him. I wasn't coming off DeAndre Hopkins. I know you weren't either. Had some shares of Hoyer as well. And I mean, Brian Hoyer, I think, is the real story here because obviously adding Arian Foster, being healthy back into the mix is great. And Hoyer, I love Brian Hoyer. I always say it. I think he's the smart quarterback that puts his team in a good position to win. And I mean, it's hard not to be in a good position to win when you have an elite running back. And now, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is easily a top 5, if not top 3 receiver in the league right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule the rest of the way, and the Texans have some very good matchups, and it's probably going to be hard for me to not use Hopkins each week he takes on a divisional opponent or, has a great matchup because the targets are just insane. No one else is getting those looks right now other than Julio Jones, but even the last 2 weeks have been, pretty pedestrian for him.
Yeah, I mean, Hopkins, he's a cash game lock for me from this point moving forward until something changes. Like, if Brian Hoyer gets hurt and they put that bum Ryan Mallett back in there, then, 1, hopefully Brian Hoyer doesn't cheer for him to do well, and 2, maybe that I won't play Hopkins. On the Jaguars side, though, we saw, obviously, TJ Yeldon was out. Saw some talk on Twitter of, are you going to play Toby Gerhart or are you going to play Denard Robinson? I threw Denard Robinson into a GPP. I'm not too proud to admit it. Needless to say, I didn't make any money in that lineup. But this is a scenario where you just play the passing game. I mean, if Yeldon's out still, all these guys are still. Hearns was kind of a disappointment, got a late touchdown, so he was okay. But Allen Robinson still seeing a ton of looks. Julius Thomas looked great, too. So Blake Bortles can stay healthy. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to still put up big numbers.
Yeah, I mean, back to Denard Robinson, it was on par with Eddie Lacy performances, so you can't be too mad at that.
Yeah, at least he was a discount from Lacy. So if you played him instead of Lacy, at least you weren't like just yelling at James Starks every time he was touched the ball like I was.
We'll get to that later too.
Yeah, that's coming up here pretty soon. Dolphins and Titans. You talked a little bit about this before the show. Dolphins, you were excited about the change in management or whatever you want to call it here with the new head coach. And it certainly paid off. I mean, they looked great. They looked focused. They looked like they were hungry. And it's a team that just was kind of lackluster the first couple weeks. But it's not to say the Titans are a great team. It's necessarily an impressive win because it's them. But, I mean, it was a dominant win. And if you played the Dolphins defense anywhere, then you probably had yourself a decent night. Yeah,
especially since they were such a value price. But Lamar Miller, I mean, he was the one that really, really shined in this one. 113 yards and a touchdown. 19 carries, finally he gets some touches, which has been the big issue for him this season. So hopefully that keeps going forward.
Yeah, definitely a nice value there with Lamar Miller here. Next up, Panthers and Seahawks. Saw a lot of hate for Greg Olsen due to his recent struggles against the Seahawks. I guess those rumors have been put to bed now as he not only had a big game, but capped it off with that touchdown grab late that apparently Cam Chancellor decided he just still is afraid to cover a tight end. So, I mean, if there's a way to beat this Seattle defense as it was last week and as it is this week, I mean, just play tight ends against him because Cam Chancellor, I mean, it's all well and good that he's got name recognition, but he looks awful in pass coverage right now. So I will continue to target them with tight ends. Not to say that I had Greg Olsen much this week, not nearly as much as I'd like, but I mean, that's a very, very vulnerable spot in that defense.
Yeah, I was quite surprised. I mean, Jonathan Stewart was the one that really surprised me. 2 touchdowns and nearly 80 yards on the ground. Hasn't been great this season at all, and I didn't expect going into Seattle he'd be the one to break it out this season.
Yeah, yeah, and then on the Seattle side, we saw Jimmy Graham finally. A couple weeks ago he complained about his role in the offense, then said he didn't, and then now he doesn't really need to complain because he saw 12 targets here.
Targets.
And it looked like Russell Wilson was looking for him, which is perfect because he is a mismatch and one that they really haven't utilized so far this year. But at the same time, this is the Seattle defense or Seattle team that we're looking at as, you don't get that call in the end zone or non-call against the Lions, and this team's sitting there at 1-5. So
yeah,
it's not to say they're bad. They've blown a fourth quarter lead in 4 games now, but this team's got a lot of work to do. And Panthers, huge win for them, stay undefeated. So that's good look moving forward. But like you said, there's still not a whole lot of guys you want to target outside of Cam Newton and Olsen and maybe Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah.
Ravens and 49ers here. Probably one of the big surprises of the week was you and I talked all week. We were talking a couple days ago about wide receivers for cash games and things like that, back and forth, and talking about how we wanted to play Steve Smith. It's a perfect matchup for Steve Smith. And then he personally said he didn't anticipate he would play. So if Steve Smith, a.k.a. the Brett Favre of wide receivers, says he doesn't think he can play, then I don't play him in my cash games at a ridiculously low price. So then what does he do? He plays and he dominates and had a huge game. And I saw him on at least one team that's currently winning one of the millionaire competitions or tournaments. But Steve Smith, though, I'm going back to that every single week now. He's way too cheap, and he's the obvious focal point of this offense.
Yeah, the Ravens are so battered. They have nobody on offense outside of Forsett and Steve Smith. There's no one to really target outside of those two. Yep. And even with Forsett not being 100%, he's still got a pretty good amount of volume in this game, which was really encouraging going forward.
Yeah, and then on the 49er side, Anquan Bolden, still pretty cheap value play. Not a guy that's got quite the upside there of Steve Smith, but he's getting targeted. And Colin Kaepernick, don't look now, but he looks, first couple weeks he looked like a quarterback that played for Nevada, and then now the last couple weeks he looks like he's back, like he's an adequate quarterback that can make plays. And 49ers, I'm not saying they're going to be a defensive stalwart because they're still pretty awful on defense, but especially if they're giving up points, Kaepernick should still have plenty of opportunities to put it up and score some points.
Yeah, if they're going to keep him priced so low, might as well take a shot at him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next one, Phillip Rivers. I don't know how many of you watched this game. I don't know if you watched this game, but I watched this game, and Phillip Rivers looked great the entire game. Over 500 total yards of passing, but that sequence of plays at the goal line at the end was just absolutely baffling to me. They twice run with Danny Woodhead up the gut, then they look past a wide open Danny Woodhead to throw to double coverage to Antonio Gates, and then on the final play they look right back to Danny Woodhead, who was covered.
Yeah, that was a great play.
Yeah,
to defend that one, but still,
it was. But the play directly before it, you see Gates getting swarmed in the corner of the end zone, and Woodhead just standing there. Granted, he's a small target. Maybe he didn't see him, but he's always looking for him. So, but either way, the real story of this one is Eddie Lacy. If I could say one player is dead to me, it's Eddie Lacy. I knew it was going to happen all week. I was going to end up with Eddie Lacy, and he was going to disappoint. Now they're saying his ankle was still bothering him. That would have been a nice thing to know prior to 1 o'clock on Sunday. But Eddie Lacy is a unplayable player for me at this point. He's in Antonio Brown territory for me, at least as far as until Ben comes back. But there's no way I'm playing Eddie Lacy anytime soon.
No, and if I didn't have any Eddie Lacy shares, then I would just say, yes, this is the right move. James Stark has looked incredibly a lot better than Lacy has. But since I am a Lacy owner, then I am not happy.
Yeah.
But it is the right move. Starks has been a guy. He's looked great. Lacy I don't even think he's in shape at all. So,
yeah. He caught that little 4-yard pass in overtime, and I was excited for a second. You get yourself what was it, 0.9 points, almost an entire point there on FanDuel. So, way to salvage your night there, Eddie. But he's untouchable at this point. And the Packers' offense outside of Starks didn't look great, really. Their defense has been really the better part of the team for the past couple weeks. They got shredded this week, but Rodgers did just enough. Randall Cobb disappeared too. I'm guessing part of that was a game plan with the Chargers trying to take him out, but I mean, two guys that were heavily owned and heavily drafted in season long, myself included, Lacey and Cobb. I mean, I'm not saying Cobb's unplayable. He's not to that point, but he's a guy that, I mean, he's easily GPP only for me for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, the Packers just aren't the cash game plays they used to be.
Yeah. Early in the year, we were talking about getting 2-3 of them in, and now it's take your shot with James Starks, baby, and that's about it. And now we get to the fun part, the game of the week, or I mean, actually, was a pretty damn entertaining late game. So we'll get into the specifics here in a minute. So tell me, as you see, I'm not even going to call it a play, that debacle. What was your thought? Just the silent, what the hell did I just see? Like everyone else was, or were you mad, or were you just in complete shock?
No, I wasn't mad because honestly, I can't even tell you what the Colts are trying to do as far as an organizational standpoint anymore. They disappoint me on all levels, and I'm watching the game and I see them running out there, and it looks like Pop Warner football, like they're trying to get the kids off the field and back on. Like that's what it looked like to me, and I was like, oh my god. But fire Pagano, that's all I gotta say. I'm so disappointed. I can't believe it.
The only thing that I've seen that looks similar to that I've ever seen in football, and I mean it's college and up, not any football, was when, Oregon Ducks, especially in the Chip Kelly times.
The extra point.
Yeah, they line up in some really weird formation. 3 guys on one side, everyone else on the other side. Sometimes they run in for the kick, sometimes they don't. It looked like that, except that they never fixed it. And it was illegal formation anyway. So apologies on your loss, but it was a competitive game, and I guess we could say with definitive fact that Michael Irvin was wrong about saying that they should have started Matt Hasselbeck because, I mean, I'm not sure who asked Michael Irvin his opinion on this anyway, but that was a really dumb thing to say. But the Patriots were good. A lot of their players not great, though. Gronk was okay, did get that touchdown, and now people are speculating today that he's hurt. I don't know anything about that, but LeGarrette Blount was the real story, catching a touchdown pass. I saw him stumbling across the in a slant route, catching that pass, and I mean, I was surprised by that. But really, like, Brady was good, not great for his price tag. Blount was really the only one that crushed value because Julian Edelman, once he was down to 9 healthy fingers, just disappeared in the second half. Yeah,
I mean, I think this is kind of the thing that's going on this season is you can get value quarterbacks to put up Brady-type numbers. I mean, look at Dalton, Hoyer. I'm not saying Stafford was all over the place, but even a guy like him, Kaepernick, I mean, these numbers are all over at their price ranges. So I think it's just a strategy going forward. You don't need to pay up at QB.
Yeah, especially if you're getting 4 points for a touchdown for your quarterback and 6 everywhere else. I mean, that's an underrated aspect, I think, of lineup building. People say, oh, well, I want my 4 touchdowns. But those 4 touchdowns, potential, not as good as Devontae Freeman's weekly 3 touchdowns. So, but I mean, on the offensive side, I mean, the Colts didn't look bad. Andrew Luck did miss a couple throws. But, I mean, both the Moncrief and Hilton looked pretty good. Gore looked great running. He didn't have a ton of touches, but, I mean, I thought he looked phenomenal. I mean, it doesn't show so much on the stat line, but, I mean, he consistently had good, solid runs. So, I mean, that's got to be encouraging for that offense moving forward, though.
Yeah, they rushed the ball very well. And I think, they pretty much looked in sync for the most part. Up until the punt play. I mean, that was really, really deflating.
Deflating.
Oh,
nice.
Deflating. I worked at it. Yeah. What was the over-under on us using Deflategate?
Right.
Like Al Michaels, Deflategate.
Yeah. All right, so I got to ask, do you have a name? Is there a name for that play?
No, but I'll come up with one. Okay. I'll get something.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with something good and put that out because, I mean, a play like that deserves its own name. But,
yeah.
Either way, it was a fun week. Got one more game left. Thanks for hanging out with us here. Check us out on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Lots of other great NFL content. And very, very soon, about a week away, some NBA content as well. So look forward to that, and we'll see you guys next time.